Hi guys, Jeff Westfall here with another Nunchaku lesson for you. Today we're going to talk about gripping. There are a couple of different factors in gripping I want to make clear. The first factor is location. Now what I mean by that is where on the stave am I holding? And this can create different effects depending on where you grip. If I want a lot of power, I choke down, way down towards the end. I can hit much harder with a choked down grip. The more I want to have control on some of the more elaborate twirling motions, I move my grip closer to the string or the chain, whatever is connecting the two staves. So if I want to do something elaborate, it's much easier to do that from the choked up grip. It's important to understand also that all weapons have a tendency, when you are holding them and swinging them, any weapon that has, to any degree, some heft to it, they have a tendency to walk down your hand. Anybody who's played with sticks for very long knows this, especially if they're training with heavier weapons. And you want to develop tricks and techniques to make adjustments for this. One thing that really works well is when you use the armpit grip. The armpit grip allows me to slide my hand down to choke down and to slide my hand up to choke up. It's very useful when I'm here to make changes if I want to get different grips. So location of the grip is an important point, and you want to play around with different locations. Maybe in a future lesson I might talk about reverse gripping. We're not going to talk about that today. Another element of gripping is gripping two staves at once. You can even reverse it and grip this way. A little silly, but you can use what in Filipino martial arts we call central baston techniques, like this. I want to talk a little bit about another element of gripping, and I'm going to get a stick out for a moment to illustrate this, because it's easier to see, I think. And that is talking about your pivot point. Now, what I mean by your pivot point is that when you're making circling motions, where's the exact pivot point in your hand? Now I'm going to get closer. Most people pivot at the point between their index finger and their thumb. They pinch. It's even possible, not recommended for combat, to keep your hand open and twirl the stick in this fashion. That's a good way with a student who has a poor understanding of the mechanics to get him to loosen up his wrist and get nice fluid motion. But this is horrible in combat, so you want to quit learning to do that as early as possible. Get back to gripping. But if your grip is so deadly tight that you can't do anything but just move like you have a hammer in your hand, you need to learn to relax. Now I'm using the pivot point, the index finger pivot point here. But I also like to use the little finger pivot point, pivoting down at the little finger where it connects. This has the advantage, especially in my opinion, in backhand motions, especially upward backhand circling or redondo motions, of giving me a much more satisfying feel than trying to do it with the index finger pivot point. When I use the index finger pivot point, a lot of times, and I bet some of you have experienced this, my puño, the butt of my weapon, gets hung up on my wrist like this. But when I go from the little finger end, that doesn't happen. It's a really nice thing to learn to understand and to play with. You also can pivot from the two middle fingers. Technically, you can pivot from any one finger, but I like to, just to keep it simple, I like to think in terms of little finger pivot, middle fingers pivot, or index finger pivot. I think you'll find out some interesting effects if you just pay attention to this. And again, how you place the pivot point in your hand has an effect on how quickly the weapon wants to walk out of your hand. That's another factor. So that's another Nunchaku lesson for you. I hope you enjoyed it. You guys stay safe. Wash your hands.